Alrighty, so it's about 4:30 in the afternoon and I'm done with scopes for the day. So a call day actually usually starts with me leaving the hospital. As a GI fellow, I take home call, which means I'm allowed to be at home, but I have to be available for any urgent cases or urgent pages and be able to talk over the phone with anyone who needs a consult. Unless there's something urgent going on at the end of the day, like a case that wasn't able to be done within business hours or something like that, I can usually go home when I'm on call, take a shower, rest for a second, and then be ready for the pages to start coming in after 5. Come on! Alrighty, I just got home and it's about 4:45. My call officially starts at 5 p.m. It's really nice to live close to the hospital as a fellow, just in case you have to go back in after hours. It's not a huge amount of time, big hassle going all the way back. Sometimes there's urgent cases where it can be helpful to be able to get to the hospital really quickly, but we're not necessarily required to live within a certain distance of the hospital. Most of the time, if someone's having an urgent GI bleed that we need to come in the middle of the night to deal with, it's not a matter of being there within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 20 minutes, because it takes a little bit of time to stabilize that patient before we can safely scope them. As long as you live decently close, it makes your life a little easier, though. Now time to go inside before it's officially 5 p.m. Alright, so now I've showered and I've changed with a couple minutes to spare. My call nights luckily aren't so busy that I get destroyed with like dozens of calls the second the clock strikes 5 p.m. It's honestly super unpredictable when I get called or how often I'm going to get called on any given call night. When I'm on call, I'm covering the general GI consults, the pancreas or biliary consults, the liver consults, and the inpatient liver service, where we actually are the primary team taking care of patients admitted to the hospital with liver issues. When I'm on call, I can get called by the transfer center. They connect me with doctors from other hospitals who need assistance because maybe they don't have GI doctors overnight, or they don't have doctors who can do the specialized GI procedures that some of our biliary attendings can do. I can also get called by the ER, looking for patients to be admitted to the liver service, or with questions about patients with GI bleeding, the medicine floor, surgery teams, and the residents that are helping cover and admit patients to the liver inpatient service that we cover overall. So we'll see how busy this night is. My first ever call night as a GI fellow, I actually didn't get my first page until after 9 p.m. But I've also had call nights where I got 5 calls within the first hour, so it's incredibly variable. Fingers crossed for a good night. And I just got my first page of the night. Looks like it's the ER, so I'm going to give them a call back, see what's going on. Stay tuned. All right, I just talked to them, not with this phone because it's fake and it's from 100 years ago. It's a patient in the ER who needs to be admitted to the hospital, and he's going to be admitted to the liver service that I help oversee. This is a patient that has what's called cirrhosis, secondary to alcohol consumption, and he's come in with some confusion. It's unfortunately really common that patients with cirrhosis or decompensated liver disease can present with confusion due to something called hepatic encephalopathy. That's probably what this guy has, but we need to do a little bit more workup to be sure. We check labs, we check a chest x-ray, we check urine, looking for signs of infection. We make sure he's not bleeding because that can trigger it as well. And we make sure he's been taking his medicines at home to help avoid confusion. There's a medicine called lactulose that we often prescribe to patients with cirrhosis, and this helps to keep the toxins out of their body that can build up from their liver disease. Normally, the liver helps detoxify your blood and take out a lot of the ammonia that builds up. But if your liver doesn't work due to cirrhosis, that ammonia can build up in your body and make you really confused. Sometimes these patients will just seem a little bit off to their family, but still be able to generally interact. But sometimes the patients will just kind of be staring off into space and not be able to interact in a meaningful way. To treat it, we give them lots and lots of lactulose. It makes them poop a lot, which kind of annoys the patients, but it helps clear out the toxins and makes them perk right back up. So now that I got the call from the ER and the patient's appropriate to come into our service, I'm going to give the call to the resident to let them know the nitty-gritty details about the patient so they can go see them and they can admit the patient. I got to admit, it's a little bit nice. I don't actually have to go in and see the patient unless there's something significantly wrong that the resident who's in the hospital right now and who will be all night, if they need help. Otherwise, I just review the patient in the chart, call the resident, tell them to go see the patient, and the resident touches base with me afterwards to go through the patient and see if there's additional questions. Then the patient's seen in the morning by the attending physician. I was making dinner and I just got a page from one of the medicine teams. They were asking if a patient who got a scope earlier today is okay to restart their diet. Sometimes after we do a scope, we don't want a patient to restart their diet just yet because we think we might have to scope them again the next day, for example. But the vast majority of times, it's okay for them to advance their diet as tolerated. Start out with liquids, and then if they feel okay, go to solid food. That was the case for this person. So now I'm going to eat my own food. So I just finished dinner. Right after I was eating, I got another page. It was from one of the medicine teams. One of their patients had a CT scan done that showed some thickening of the esophagus. Usually when that happens, that could be due to a lot of things. That could be due to something as simple as esophagitis or inflammation, but it could be concerning for cancer. So often what we do in those situations is that means we have to do an endoscopy to go down and look at their throat, maybe take biopsies of the esophagus specifically, to see if there's anything concerning. For a consult like this after hours, I don't necessarily have to go in to see them right now because the patient is stable. There's not concern that they're actively bleeding. Their vital signs are stable. They'll be just fine overnight. It's more the team wanted to give me a heads up so we can kind of put the patient down and be planning on seeing them, and I can give them initial recommendations. So I recommended that they start the patient on an antacid medicine and that they make them NPO at midnight without fruity water after midnight, because then that'll give us the chance to do an endoscopy tomorrow if we evaluate the patient and conclude that that's really what they need. Tomorrow morning, the consult team will get in around 7 in the morning, and one of the people on the consult team will see that patient, write a full note, present it to the attending, and then if we all are in agreement, we'll perform an endoscopy during the day tomorrow. Now I'm going to sit and watch a little bit of TV. We'll see how it goes. Sometimes I just get paged right away the second I start a show, and sometimes I can watch an entire show in peace. It's really hard to predict, which is part of what makes call a little bit frustrating sometimes, but we'll see how it goes. So I made it through an entire episode of Lupin, positive, but then I got 2 more pages. The first page was actually from a clinic patient. After hours, if clinic patients have issues, they can call in and get paged through to the GI fellow on call, and we can help them with any urgent issue. In this case, it was an issue with the patient's prep, which had been ordered to go to a pharmacy, and there was an issue there, so they couldn't pick it up. So since they have a colonoscopy scheduled for tomorrow, it's pretty important that they drink their prep. So it's reasonable to call the after hours line for something like that. I called the pharmacy, fixed the issue, and now they have their prep and they'll get their colonoscopy tomorrow. The other call was from the transfer center. Now the transfer center connects our hospital with a lot of other surrounding hospitals in the Illinois and Missouri area. There are some pretty tiny hospitals out there that have patients that they just aren't equipped to deal with, either from a procedure standpoint or just because they don't have GI overnight. Some hospitals are pretty tiny and they don't have specialists. In this particular case, the call was from a small hospital in Illinois for a patient that had gallstone pancreatitis, or at least that's what it sounds like over the phone. And they wanted the patient transferred over here for consideration for an ERCP, which is a procedure where you can take gallstones out of the bile duct that gets stuck, and that can help fix the pancreatitis that they have. Based on the vitals and the labs and the description, the patient sounded like they were stable for transfer, so I accepted them to come over to our hospital. They'll probably arrive in the middle of the night, so I might get called about that just for an update, but then we'll be able to see them for a formal consultation tomorrow and potentially do the procedure tomorrow to take the stone out of the bile duct. All right, I've had another lull, which is nice. No pages for the last hour or so, fingers crossed. So now I'm gonna get ready for bed. So I just got paged from the transfer center again. It was an outside hospital. A patient is having a GI bleed there and they don't have any GI doctors overnight. So they want to send the patient over here. So we'll see what happens if the patient arrives in the middle of the night and they're unstable. I might have to go in a little bit to see them. But the thing is, with how full hospitals are these days, a lot of the times, even though we accept a patient to come over here, it might be like 6 or 7 hours before they come. So we'll see. I'll get a call when the patient arrives if they arrive while I'm still on call and if they're unstable. So the ER just called about a patient to be admitted to our liver service. They came in with really bad swelling of their belly and of their legs. They had some belly pain too. Whenever a liver patient comes in and they have swelling in their belly, if they have fluid in their belly and they're a cirrhotic patient, meaning that they have chronic liver failure, then you need to sample some of that fluid to see if they have an infection there. If they do have an infection, it's called spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, and it needs antibiotics, and it's pretty serious. So they're going to check for that, and then we're going to admit the patient to our service for kind of further monitoring. This is my crested gecko Tyrone. Sometimes I hang out with him when I'm on call because he's nocturnal, so he only comes out at night. Hey Tyrone. I'm sure he's really confused about why I'm awake. So I just got a call notifying me that the patient that I told you guys about before, the patient with gallstone pancreatitis, had arrived here at our hospital. Had successfully been transferred. From the description from the resident taking care of the patient, there's nothing that urgently needs to be done. Sometimes a patient, if they have a gallstone stuck in their bile duct, it can cause something called acute cholangitis, which causes fever and can cause them to go into shock, and that's like an emergency. But there's no sign of that right now, so we'll just plan to keep our previous plan, and the team can see them in the morning. Alrighty, I made it through the night. As you can see, my call's just about over. My call ends technically at 7 a.m. Not a terrible night. I would say probably kind of an average night. So I got a decent amount of sleep, probably cumulatively 6 to 7 hours, woke up a few times. So you can see as a GI fellow, you're certainly not awake the entire night. But what really becomes challenging about our call nights is that we have to go to work right now. I have a full day of work where I'll be at work, from 7 to 4, 7 to 5. It's not like the on-call situation some people have where they only have to work in the morning or up till noon after they've been on call. So I'll sign out all the patients that I got because during the day we have a liver fellow, we have a biliary pancreas fellow, and then we have the general GI fellows. and I'm going to tell them about the consults and the calls that I got overnight if anything needs to be followed up on or any patients need to be seen. And then I'm going to go in and do some more scopes. And you might have noticed I didn't have to go into the hospital to see any patients tonight. And for my fellowship, at least, that's not necessarily unusual. I would say I've been a fellow for about 10 months now, and I would say that I've had to go in maybe 6 or 7 times after hours in the middle of the night. So it's definitely unusual for us, at least, to have to go in. For us, it's more common to just get a lot of calls where we have to give advice or recommendations over the phone. So gonna go get changed, eat some breakfast. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments or if there's any videos like this that you'd like me to do in the future. Thanks for watching.